Hey guys, before I start, story 2 that I will be reading is really gory and has a lot of detail. I was debating on whether I should put it up on here or not because of how disgusting it really is, not much as scary. I don't really feel like eating anymore, so if you guys don't really want to hear it or anything, just stop listening after story 1.
Number 1.
Thump. The girl jerked awake. She glanced at the window, afraid of what she would see. Yet, it just revealed nothing but the dark. They're back, she thought anxiously. A week ago, the girl awoke to find that somebody had spray-painted loops and scribbles of blue and red on their garage door. Mum thought it was a rival gang at first, maybe trying to intimidate the girl's brother's clan, but the girl wasn't so sure. She'd never seen gang graffiti like this. Usually, it was only one color, and they'd write out or just a letter and a number, like the X4 she had seen in a bathroom stall at school. If they used a lot of colors, it was to paint a nickname in cool, bubbly letters, like the ones under the bridge on her walk home. This looked nothing like graffiti. She had thought it was silly at the time, but the next morning, as Mum was leaving for work, she noticed something lying across the top of the driveway. It was a long wooden board, with nails poking through it, sharp side up. It was a good thing Mum noticed it, because it would have popped all her tires for sure. The girl was anxious about it, though nothing bad had happened. The events were strange, more than anything, but Mum said she'd ask her boyfriend to stay over the next night to keep them safe. That made the girl feel a little better, but something had happened that night too. The girl thought that all of those globs of white on his shiny BMW were just bird poop. It looked like a whole flock of giant birds had unloaded their intentional burdens right on his car on purpose. And since the girl didn't like him much, it made her laugh. Mum's boyfriend got mad and cursed a lot, though because the globs turned out to be paint remover, he had to get the whole car repainted. Somehow, targeting a full-grown man like that made the girl more frightened than anything else. It didn't feel like teenager pranksters anymore, nor a gang rivalry. At the present, she was worried she wouldn't be able to hear anything, even if something was right outside the door, because her heart was pounding so hard in her ears. She strained to listen for another sound anyway, and her eyes darted to the source of the noise and realized it was coming from her brother's bedroom, which shared a wall with the living room. They're probably doing it, she cringed in discomfort. Her brother and his girlfriend were supposed to be watching her. She didn't really need a babysitter, but Mum's boyfriend didn't want to come over anymore. Mum had night classes and wouldn't let the girl stay here alone, since someone kept messing with the house. The girl turned up the volume on the TV to drown them out. She'd fallen asleep watching Nickelodeon, but now an old show in black and white was on. She considered just going to bed, but her room was upstairs and the staircase was dark. The laughing and talking from the sitcom was comforting. She would just fall asleep on the couch, and Mum would put her in bed when she got home. By the time the episode ended, the thumping on her brother's room was long gone. Now he was playing his rap tapes, and even though she liked the music, and she'd even steal his Walkman when he was out of the house to listen to them, the deep shuddering bass penetrated her heart at the night and set her on edge. It would be less overwhelming if she went upstairs, so she resigned herself to brave the darkness and try to fall asleep in her bed. As she rose from the couch to turn off the television, she thought she glimpsed a flash of light from outside. She froze. A car? The house was set against a hill, so the living room windows looked out on mostly sky and treetops, not roads or sidewalks. It couldn't be a car. Lightning? But there hadn't been a cloud in the sky all day. Just as she had convinced herself she had imagined it, the girl saw the light again. It was a flashlight. Someone was walking through the yard below their back deck. The beam from the lamp flickered up through the trees as though stepping over larger logs and stumps. She could see the man by the dim light coming from the window at which she stood, and it was definitely a man, with a big, broad back and long legs stomping through the bush, edging closer and closer to the shed by their propane tank. When he stopped and set down the pack he was carrying, the girl jumped back and turned, running to her brother's room. She glanced at the splintering hole that he had kicked in the door and for a moment reconsidered, but someone was outside their house. The oven, or like a litter box, or both at the same time.
What do you want?
There's something outside.
Shit, Mum's home.
No, it's not Mum. I think it's like last time. The girl started to cry. Her brother was being stupid. His eyes were red, and his girlfriend was just lying there in his bed, doing nothing when there was someone outside their house. She wished Mum was home. Someone's outside? Yes, that's what I've been trying to tell you, the girl sobbed. Her brother pulled on his red and black plaid jacket and clumsily pushed her aside. He strode to the living room window, the one looking out down the hill, and the girl followed. She could see the man down there, crouched over his pack, like he was trying to hide, as he pulled something out of his pack. Something long and shiny. It was a handsaw. The girl pressed her face to the glass to see better.
Hey, I see you, motherfucker. I'm gonna call the fucking cops.
Her brother shouted, his barely post-pubescent voice cracking at the last word. The man leapt up and dropped the saw. Before the girl's brother could shout anything else, the man was sprinting up the hill to Begonia Road, running at an angle to get away from their house. The girl's brother turned on his heel and burst out the front door. Just as the girl was starting to worry that her brother had found the man, and the man might hurt him, her brother came back in the door, sweaty, pale, and out of breath.
He's gone.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Do you think he'll come back?
I don't fucking know, right? Just go to bed.
The girl went upstairs to her room, but she couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed until she saw the headlights in the window that announced Mum's return, and crept to the landing outside her room and listened to her brother tell Mum what had happened.
Jesus.
Mum sighed when she heard the story.
Thank God you guys are okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Don't look at me like that, Mom. It wasn't because of me.
I didn't say it was you, Joseph. I just don't know who else could be doing this, or why.
He wasn't trying to scare us. He was trying to blow up the...
The house wouldn't have blown up. It would have caused a leak, that's all. Cost us a fortune to have it fixed and the tank refilled. Maybe the spark from the blade would have started a fire, but it wouldn't have blown our stock. I'll check it out tomorrow.
Maybe he didn't know that. He was trying to blow us up.
They went quiet. The girl tiptoed to her bed and crawled under the covers so that when Mum came and checked on her, she would have thought the girl was deeply asleep. But she didn't sleep at all that night. Mum said the tank was probably fine the next morning, but she could smell the propane and had called a professional to come and make sure that it wasn't leaking. It was Saturday, so Mum made French toast for the girl and Joseph. Joseph's girlfriend was still sleeping. The phone rang. Mum lifted it from the mount on the wall and said,
Hello?
Her face went cold. The girl's dad must have been on the other line. He asked how she was, the girl guessed, because Mum said,
Fine.
but she said it in a high-pitched voice that betrayed her words. Mum never lied, except for when she said, fine, and always in that tone. The girl's dad wanted to come over and borrow some tools from the shed. Mum didn't say anything about last night, or the other nights. The girl knew that Mum was afraid that he would use the information in court to make her seem like an unfit mother. He did that when the girl got lice from school, and said that Mum's home wasn't clean enough. Mum's house was always clean. The girl's dad arrived in his big white Chevy truck soon after they finished breakfast. and he walked into the house like he lived there. He swooped the girl up on his big, broad shoulders, and the girl wrinkled her nose at the odd smell of his thick jean jacket that had mingled with his usual scent of sawdust and cigarettes. Mum gave him a cup of coffee, black. He talked about the garage door, said it was gang-related for sure. Joseph a nasty look.
I don't think so, Mike. I haven't seen any graffiti like that before.
Well, I have, and I think you know what to do about it.
Mike said, looking accusingly at Joseph again. Joseph got up.
Yeah, I do.
Said Mum.
We repaint.
Mike offered to help, and she said he'd be back tomorrow with a roller and a bucket of paint. But now he had to leave, so he went out the door and hiked down the trail to the shed. The girl went outside when he was back up in his truck to say goodbye. He was lifting a pack into the passenger seat. She saw something shiny sticking through the open zipper. "What's that?" she asked.
I saw. I'm helping someone with a project today.
"You don't have one of those?"
I did. I must have left it here last time I visited.
They locked eyes for a moment. The girl tried not to let her thoughts show on her face. She wasn't sure what she thought anyway. She felt like she did when she was taking a test at school, and she knew the answer to a question but just couldn't pull it out of her memory. Her dad broke his gaze first, smirked and climbed up onto his truck. He didn't look at her again, as he turned his truck around in the driveway and jogged up to Virginia Road. But that smell of his jacket lingered on the girl's pajamas. The distinct smell of propane.
Number 2.
Hell is worse than you think. Trust me. I know this sounds odd. I mean, the idea of eternal hell being ripped apart over and over by demons sounds horrific. But that image is just stereotypical. Believe me, it can be a lot worse than simply dealing with a whole load of pain. Don't get me wrong, that version of hell is horrific, but I'd gladly swap that eternity with mine. You see, hell is personalized to you. Hell delves into your thoughts, eternity with mine. You see, hell is personalized to you. Hell delves into your thoughts and unlocks your deepest and darkest fears, your flaws, and your nightmares. It turns these into reality. The most horrific and twisted kind of reality you could imagine. You relive this reality over and over. I'm going to describe my own versions of hell to you, seeing as though I cannot know for sure what others have experienced. Throughout my life I was a criminal. I have robbed many banks in my time. I have even murdered a few people in the process. Not that I wanted to. They simply got in the way. There was something about stealing that gave me a burst of adrenaline. This adrenaline felt good. It made me feel alive. Unstoppable almost. Even as a child I have vague memories of stealing sweets from my local convenience store, pocketing them and quietly sneaking out, smiling to myself. Back then I was never detected. In my adulthood as well, I managed to slip away from the police many times. My luck ran out at the age of 45. I was caught and arrested, in prison for 20 years, not only for robbing banks, but for the murders as well. I was just glad it wasn't a life sentence. 20 years is bad, but at this point I had known something was going to catch me eventually. The stealing was an addiction, even with the knowledge that I would be caught sooner or later. I simply couldn't bring myself to stop. It was as if I had already accepted the fate that I had used up my life this way. There was nothing I could do now to change it. Prison was a horrible experience. I aged into an old man. My outlook on the world seemed to change as I watched the sunset every day through those dull grey bars. Stealing slowly became pointless to me. The idea of robbing now didn't appeal to me at all. Even though I had now, in a way, changed as a person, the damage had already been done. A lifetime of stealing and killing could not go unnoticed. Somewhere down south, a special someone had made me a note of my name, had smiled an evil smile, and doomed me to an eternity of torture. Back in real life, however, the thought of hell was never on my mind. The principal reason for this, of course, would be that I was an atheist. Why would I have been afraid of something I didn't believe in? That was ludicrous. Anyway, the story continues when I was finally released from prison. I had never attained a wife during my life. I had had a couple of girlfriends as a young man, but I suppose a criminal lifestyle didn't appeal to many women. I died as an old man in a rocking chair, alone by the fire. So that was my life. My quick, pointless life. After being here for an eternity, any life becomes meaningless eventually. I've been here so long, I'm surprised that I can still remember it. Perhaps I am being forced to recall it every day. An extra little torment on top of the torture, knowing that I am now powerless to change my mistakes. Now, however, my life has become almost non-existent. A brief flash in my memories. I'll always feel the regret though. The overwhelming feeling of regret that consumes my mind, wishing with all my being that I could have been a better man. But there's no going back now. Something I haven't mentioned yet is I am a vegetarian. A vegetarian. It sounds odd, doesn't it? When you think about it. This hard, murdering bank robber disliked eating meat, disliked hurting animals. This is what my personalized hell endorsed. This is the weakness that it plucked out of my head when I entered hell. It used my vegetarian nature as my personal torture device. Something to torment me with for an eternity. So, I will now describe exactly what happened when I closed my eyes for that final time. Exactly what happened when I lay back in my rocking chair by the fire and as a used up old man closed my eyes forever. I awoke, opened my eyes, breathed in the air. The first thing I noticed was that I felt healthier than I had been in years. I felt like a young man again, with new vigor and energy. Sure enough, as I looked down and examined my hands, I noticed that my wrinkles, arthritis, everything, had simply gone. At first, I had been overjoyed, yelping with happiness, punching the air. I believed that I was in heaven. I'd felt better than I had in years, overwhelmed with a feeling of happiness. This temporary feeling subsided slightly when I realized where I was standing. I was in a room, a dark room with bluish walls. The floor and ceiling bore the same characteristics. Dark, cracked brick which lacked windows, doors, or anything. There weren't any lights either, which caught me as odd, seeing as though I could see quite easily, despite being confined in such a sheltered room. "Hello?" I asked out loud. It was then that I noticed a deafening silence, a concrete quiet that made my ears ring. After a while I began to feel ill. Started contemplating all the possible places I could be. Was this heaven? Was this a temporary holding place? Was this hell? I tried to keep myself occupied by feeling along the walls, looking for any sign of a way out. Doing nothing in an empty room would have soon driven me to an insanity.
Meal 1.
A voice rang out, making me jump. It was a low, monotonous voice of a man. It echoed around the empty room. "Hello?" I said in response, hoping that perhaps someone had come to collect me. Hoping that someone had perhaps arrived to take me away from this claustrophobic place. I was wrong, however. for no one appeared. A door didn't open, no angel came in with a smile to greet me. Instead, a metal platter appeared in the middle of the room. On it, a piece of cooked meat. A sickness settled in my stomach as I crept over to the plate. It looked like lamb. It was at this point that I hoped I was dreaming. I hoped that I was still an old man in my rocking chair. That I had perhaps simply drifted off to sleep by the fire and was having some sort of vivid nightmare. A very, very vivid nightmare. I don't eat meat, I whimpered. I was a vegetarian after all. The idea of eating meat was disgusting. Not only the fact that it came from an animal, but also the taste. There was something about it that had just never appealed to me. Something about the idea that an animal was killed to provide me with this meal. That I was chewing on its insides. Its muscle. Muscle that was perhaps used by the animal several weeks earlier to potter around a field chewing on grass. Without warning, I suddenly fell to my hands and knees in front of the plate. This shocked me. It felt like I had lost all control of my body, as if something was driving me. So, unable to stop, my hands reached forward and plucked the lamb of the plate. I tried desperately to resist, but my hands stuffed the meat into my mouth. My mouth then started chewing, as if by itself. I choked several times, reeling from the taste I had always been disgusted by. My throat swallowed the dry lamb and I coughed several times, choking on its dry texture. After it was done, my body was released from control and I fell backwards onto the cold ground. The platter that had held the meat seemed to melt away into the deep cracks of the floor, trickling away like water. "What is this?" I shouted. My protest was met with 2 words from the deep-voiced man.
Meal 2.
I watched the ground in front of me with hushed trepidation. What would appear there? What would appear there? More meat? No. It was worse. After several moments, a small bird appeared. A small robin with closer inspection. It flapped its wings but remained standing, looking at me with its black beady eyes. "No!" I screamed. I stood up and ran to one wall, pressing my back against it. "No, this can't be happening." The small robin simply stared at me, making no effort to fly away. For a fleeting moment the little bird seemed to look malicious, evil almost, as if the bird was in on all of this nightmare, knowing what was about to happen to me. It took me a while to realize that my body was already moving on its own again. I had pulled myself away from the wall and was now taking steps towards the bird. I squinted my eyes shut, hoping to somehow wake up, hoping that this was indeed just a horrifically vivid dream. My eyes, however, were suddenly wrenched open again by some invisible force I had no control, and I couldn't do anything to stop what happened next. My hand reached forward and picked the robin up. It struggled in my hand, flapped its wings frantically. Unable to stop, my hand slowly moved towards my mouth. The head of the robin slid between my teeth. I could feel its beak tapping against them, pecking my gums. Without warning, my jaw clenched shut with supernatural force and the little bird was killed instantly. Its neck broken. The blood from its neck oozed into my mouth, the copper taste covering my tongue. I gagged several times, and then my hand proceeded to force the rest of the bird into my mouth, causing me to choke. I began chewing. It crunched as I did. Blood oozed from my lips and trickled down my chin, soaking into the top of my shirt. Chewing through the feathers was tough. They became stuck between my teeth. When my throat had swallowed the robin, the control was released from me yet again. I collapsed to the ground moaning. It was at this point I began to cry, sobbing loudly. A grown man reduced to tears. I retched a couple of times and vomited on the ground. Coughed, choked. I was a mess. And it was only meal 2.
Meal 3.
The man's voice rang out again. "Shut up!" I screamed at the top of my voice. "Shut up!" I knew it was pointless yelling, but did so anyway. I refused to look up at what had appeared in the middle of the room. I closed my eyes. By now I realized I was in hell, or something similar. At this point I didn't want to be conscious. I didn't want to be here. I decided to simply cease to exist. An eternity of nothingness was heaven in comparison to this. Desperate, I covered my eyes with my hands and adopted a fetal position, hoping that somehow I'd be taken away from here, hoping that I'd simply lose consciousness. It was then that I heard it, a bleating noise. I knew without looking that there was a lamb standing in the middle of the room. I screamed. I screamed wordlessly, mindlessly, crazily. I had been in this place for what, 10 minutes? I was already bordering on delirium. But there was something. There was something inside me that kept me awake, kept me from feeling tired, passing out, dying, going insane. This was the same force that was now making me walk towards the lamb. It was keeping me grounded in the room, and it didn't want me to escape physically or mentally. I dropped to my knees in front of the animal. My hand slowly reached out and grabbed it around the middle. I brought it up to my face and my teeth plunged into its neck. I must have severed an artery because blood began pumping into my mouth. The lamb bleated frantically, kicking its legs. My arms kept it in place, however, and I drank its blood like a carnivore, being forced to guzzle it. I kept wanting to lose myself to sanity, to get away from this, but something kept bringing me back again and again. Every time I teetered on the brink of fainting, something suddenly snapped me back to my senses, back into the room where I was forced to experience the torture. My teeth began chewing through its neck. The lamb quietened down. It was dead. My body forced to eat the lamb whole, crunching through its bones. My teeth were chipped and splintered in the process. My gums began bleeding. Throughout all of this I kept throwing up, vomiting all over a half-eaten lamb. I was still unable to stop, however. I simply began eating the vomit-drenched carcass, and this in turn made me vomit even more. Throughout this ordeal, I had been crying the entire time, sobbing. By the time I was finished and released from the control, I slumped backwards onto the floor, moaning like an animal, moaning in pain, in pure misery. I was covered in blood, in bits and bone. Some entrails covered the ground. The stench was horrible, making me gag. I dragged myself away from the pool of blood to one side of the room and I leaned my back against the wall. "I'm sorry," I cried. "I'm sorry." I hoped that somehow my sins would have been forgiven due to my sudden apology. That somehow whatever was holding me would become compassionate and free me from this nightmare. In all my time here, however, nothing I had ever uttered has ever been met by any sort of sympathy. The response to my pleas always consisted of 2 words. 2 words that have now consumed my life, my thoughts, my existence.
Meal 4.
The voice sounded again. I moved my eyes over to the center of the room reluctantly. By now I was a mess of blood, vomit, tears, and saliva. My teeth were broken and cracked, my gums were torn apart and bleeding. I glanced at what now occupied the center of the room. What I saw made me burst into sobs, into misery-filled sobs. Then I started screaming once again, screaming insanely, for what now occupied the center of the room was a human being, an adult man. But not any adult man. It was an exact copy of myself grinning evilly in my direction. And as I pulled myself up from the wall and slowly approached him for my next meal, as my teeth plunged into his shoulder, the man let out a deep, long laugh. Hell is worse than you think. Trust me.